Hello, everyone. My name is Cynthia Emerson, and I am the DAIR Program Manager. Welcome. Also joining me today from Canary is Tom Vitez, the Senior Director of Applications, Don McCullough, DAIR's Solution Architect, and Hervé Guy, the Manager of Analytics, and our French translator for today. So welcome, and thank you for attending today's DAIR webinar, one in a series that we will be bringing to you quarterly. Just a few notes. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available online for you folks later. And we're also making a PDF version available of the presentation for all of you who have attended today. We're going to have breaks throughout this webinar for questions, and we'll unmute everyone so that you can go forward and ask those questions. You can also use the question and answer message facility from the menu to type in any questions at any time, and we will answer those at our Q&A breaks. So with that, I would just like to pass it over to Hervé to welcome everyone as well.
Bonjour, mon nom c'est Hervé Guy de Canary. J'espère que vous m'entendez bien. Bienvenue et merci à tous de participer au webinaire de l'ATIR d'aujourd'hui. Ce webinaire est l'un d'une série que nous prévoyons organiser à tous les trimestres. Ce webinaire est présentement enregistré et sera disponible en ligne à une date ultérieure. Nous mettrons également à la disposition des participants une version française et une version anglaise en PDF de la présentation d'aujourd'hui. Nous aurons des pauses tout au long du webinaire pour des questions et à ce moment, on réactivera tout le monde afin que vous puissiez écrire ou poser vos questions. S'il vous plaît, pour ce faire, utilisez la fonction de message questions et réponses du menu pour nous soumettre vos questions à tout moment et nous y répondrons pendant les pauses de questions et réponses. Voilà, Cynthia. Cynthia?
Merci, Hervé. Thank you very much. And with that, we'll jump to the next slide, which is our agenda for today. First up, we have a couple of very brief updates for you that I will share in just a moment. And then the main topic for you is how to deploy Docker in the DAIR cloud. And we'll be having Don present that and then giving you a live demo. We'll follow that up with the questions and just a closing thought. Next slide. So not too many updates for you folks today. The main one is I just wanted to make you aware that we have adopted SurveyMonkey integration with Slack, and we are planning to use that with our DAIR support Slack channel with you folks. And the main reason is we just really want to make sure we have a way to quickly and easily engage with our community and with you, our end users, to find out, what it is that we can be doing better or to get real-time feedback. So we are planning to use that tool. So look for some of those quick polls coming up. And we do really encourage you to take advantage of giving us your feedback when you see that come forward. With that, I think we all know that surveys are time consuming sometimes, and you see them and you're like, oh gosh, yeah, I'll get to it. The reason we are using the Slack channel and this particular integration is our intention is very much to ask 1, 2, 3 questions. They will always be very short, very to the point. If you see the request for some feedback and it does include an exit link to the SurveyMonkey, I promise you all it will be a very short 1 to 3 question survey unless we've otherwise indicated and let you know in advance. Having said that, as you all know, I'm very new to the team, and I welcome any of you and all of you to provide any feedback that you would like me to have about the DAIR program or things you'd like to see. At any time through the Slack channel or to me directly through my email. And the second update is we are looking to increase the booster pack catalog. Very excited about how well it's been received to date, and are looking for booster pack builders to contribute and help us grow that catalog for everyone. We are about to put that process online in order to make it easier for folks to express an interest in providing a booster pack or engage with us for some questions. In the meantime, if you have an interest in potentially becoming a booster pack builder in any one of these areas, or an area that maybe isn't here but you think would have tremendous value for the program, we do welcome you to just reach out to me directly with that interest in what you would like to know and what we can provide you in feedback about what that looks like. But we are definitely looking to increase our booster pack. So look for some updates shortly on how to do it online, but in the meantime, please do reach out to me if you'd like more information. And with that, I am going to pass it over to Dawn for the main event. Dawn.
Thank you. Okay, let's move to the next slide. So in the presentation that you will all receive or have received, you'll get this overview. Well, you're welcome to look at this for clarity at any time. This is a picture of the whole solution once we're finished today. We will be doing this solution in both AWS and Azure. So you'll have a clear understanding of both clouds and how to use it. Okay, next, I will share my screen. There we go. Should all see the familiar interface of our cloud broker tool. And this is a test tenant where we will be working today, which is very similar to the tenant environment that you have today. We have spun up 2 instances already, just for simplicity's sake, and we will get started here. So to get things rolling, it is important to think of your environment and how you want to build it up front. You want to have a good understanding of the containers that you're going to need and how much infrastructure they're going to require to run. Quite often, containers will run a lot more efficient than you assume they will. So it's a good idea to do some research on how much resources things need. And also the goal of a container environment is to run lean and many rather than big and small numbers. So small instances rather than large ones are a great way to go. The reason being is that you will build a model for your application and your processes that suit the ability to expand and grow your environment. Scalable infrastructure is about small and many over large and few. So I'm going to quickly show you deploying instances, but we will use these 2 instances for our demo. But I just want to make sure everyone is aware of the process to deploy instances, and that is under provisioning instances. We can add an instance right here. I'm sticking with Ubuntu as examples, but everything else works the same. We can pick the flavor we want here. If there's versions, if it's Windows, there'll be versions of Windows here. The layout is set as Ubuntu. We can pick different layouts if there are different layouts for this flavor, but there are not. We can try and keep that simple. Plan is the size of instance you want. We do try and keep this up to date with the available ones that will fit within budget. Like I said, try and stick as you're starting your development and developing your app. Try and stick with smaller instances. They're easier on your budget, and you can definitely scale out as you need to get better performance. Resource pool. This will be your tenant name. Whatever the name of that you registered with us as your company name will be the tenant name, and that is your resource pool. Networks will also be under those resource pool, as will security groups. They'll all have the same name. And a public IP, just assign EIP. That's all you need for an AWS instance. And we can deploy that. I'm not going to bother because we've got the instances, but the next thing is backups. And if we go to next, you get a summary, and then you can commit. When you hit complete, that instance will start deploying. It's that simple for AWS. And for Azure, we add an instance. Same thing, Ubuntu. Next. Oh, sorry. Moving too fast. Azure group, and everything will come into play. The Azure deployment is slightly different, but is basically the same general principle. The layout is the same. The plans that are available are here. We can pick a smallish instance. Resource DAIR is DAIR test tenant in this case, but it would be your tenant name. The network will be under your tenant name as well. Security groups will be under your tenant name as well. And availability set is something you have the option to use or not use. Azure does not have availability zones the way AWS does. They have availability sets. And what an availability set does is instead of you choosing a different data center, you're telling them to deploy this infrastructure this time on a different set of infrastructure, guaranteed. So if you're going to be deploying 2 instances and you want them on a different piece of infrastructure that's going to be changed in a different window, so that you have stability in your high availability set, then you would set one in one availability zone and one in the other. In our case, we will just not set it, but you can set a new availability set anytime you want and create them as you need. And then next, you get to define backups or scaling or deployment scripts if you want. We go next, and we get the summary of what we've decided in the end and what the costs are for it, and we can then complete if we need to. I don't need to here because I already have the 2 instances, so there we go. We've covered it. So the solution we're providing here for Docker, before I move on and start that, is a solution that will work with any instance you have today or any instance you create. It does not matter what cloud. It's the same process no matter where. I will now show you that in both AWS and Azure, and we'll get her done. So I'm going to work from a terminal. You can work from the console. Excuse me. We almost forgot one important thing. We almost forgot the thing that everyone forgets. I mean, everyone. I do it myself. I just did. Security groups. So I've got the Azure security group already set up just to keep this as simple as possible. But the way you get to security groups is click on your instance name, and then down here, you'll see this tab called Network. Below that, you'll see this security groups. And if you open that up, you'll see the security group that's assigned to your instance. You go click on that security group and it'll take you to that security group. You'll see we've got some rules here, and I've already got access for me to SSH to that box. No problem at all. But what we need to do is add some rules. So I'm going to grab my IP. And the easiest way to get to know what your IP address is to search what is my IP on Google. What that'll tell you is what the public internet thinks your IP is. Quite often we're hidden behind the NAT of our cable modem or whatever, or in our company network. Whatever the internet says our IP address is what is going to be given access. So we add some rules. This is the same interface, the exact same process for every single cloud in our environment. So I'm going to say I'm going to say Docker machine. It's ingress. It's a custom rule. Protocol is TCP. And the port range is 2376, just the one port. So we just put 2376 in there. Yep. And the source is my IP. The /32 is just saying it's a single IP. And you need to add that for the rule to work. And the destination instance is fine. That means any instance that's associated with your tenant space will be allowed to, you can communicate on that port with it if it has an internet IP. Save changes. And now we've got our 2376 rule. We need to add 2 more rules. We need to add HTTP, custom rule, TCP. Port we need is 80. Source type is network, and in this case, we don't want to lock it down. We want, I want it available to the world. You may not. Most people, though, HTTP, HTTPS, they want it available to the world. So we'll leave that. What you need to do there is 0.0.0.0/0, and that will do that. That'll make it open to anywhere. Now, the thing I will ask is that you do not do this with SSH or with ports like 2376, which are application ports. This is a good way to get yourself hacked on on critical admin ports. I can tell you that an instance spun up in AWS or Azure is being scanned for an open port 22 automatically all day, every day. Your instance will be identified as open on 22 to the hacker communities within about 4 seconds. And automated scripts will start trying to execute vulnerabilities. And I'll tell you that the instances that you deploy will need to be patched. I've got patches all done on these 2 instances because that can take a bit of time. But there was over 250 security patches for each OS and each environment available the moment I deployed them. So if one of those vulnerabilities is a backdoor capability of SSH, it will be exploited that quickly in literally minutes. And a human hasn't even touched it. Once it's exploited, they will install code, and it'll be identified to a community that it's available, and people will start logging in and doing things to it. Lovely world we live in, but that's the way she is. And like I said, one more rule, HTTPS, custom rule, TCP, 443, and once again, 0.0. There we go. Okay, so we've got our security group set up. You need to do that for each cloud. Once you get your security group set up for each cloud, you can work instances in there as often as you want. And they'll all get the same security group rules. So we're moving on to the console. Here we go. So the first thing we have to do in order for any of this to work is that we have to install Docker on our machine, on the machine we're going to use. Is that going to be our local laptop like it is in my case, or is it going to be a dedicated Docker server that the developers log into to do their work and from a central location? That's up to you. But wherever you're managing your containers from, you need to have Docker installed. There are links which will be provided in the chat as well as in the documentation that will be shared after this webinar on our support site that will take you to where you can get access to Docker for Windows or Docker for Mac or Docker for Linux platforms. So with that said, we have 2 instances up and running. So we're going there. Once you have an instance configured and Docker running on your local machine, then you need to log into each instance and you need to configure it for Docker. So we're going to start with AWS. And this is our instance. As you see, now I've got 0 packages can be updated and 0 security updates are needed. That's because I patched the system earlier today. So these steps will all be provided in the documentation, but we got to run each of them. And then now that we've updated apt-get, we have to add a repository for Docker. And then we have to add a key to allow that repository to be worked.
Don?
Yes.
This is Cynthia. Is it possible to increase the font size slightly for participants?
Yep.
Terrific, thanks.
How's that?
I think
I'll go one more.
Thanks.
Now we need to tell apt-get to grab the key. Let me see what I did wrong there. Oh. Interesting. Oh, excuse me. Sometimes you just need a little poke to actually realize that you're making a mistake. There we go. Now we've got our fingerprint. I've caused less problems. Nice. Now we're installing Docker components, and now we need to update for that new repository. And now that we've updated for that repository, we can install Docker. A little complex, but the trick is that it really is just a matter of following the process. And I discovered one place where I want to clarify it for you guys, because while presenting, I wasn't paying close enough attention and I made a mistake myself. So one more thing we need to do, and that is Docker Machine, when it's trying to control our hosts in a way that allows us to remotely manage containers and deploy containers and try things out, it can't be hit with a password prompt like we were when we started all this. So we make one change to allow the instance to sudo without a password. This bothers some people. It doesn't bother others. The fact is that the easy way to get around this and be a little bit more secure on your logins is to set a pin on your SSH key. So your SSH key has 2 factors, and you're verifying that your SSH key is not easily being used by somebody else. That is the only thing I can say. It is a requirement to use Docker Machine remotely to manage hosts. You got to remember to do sudo. And all we have to do is change our user with a Shift-C and Command-V. And now our user is able to sudo without a password. And we can check that by doing a sudo space -i, and automatically it works. We don't get challenged for a password. No problems at all. So we can exit out of that, and we can exit out of this instance. It is now ready to go. And we can do the same over on Azure. So our Azure instance is at 20. We log into that, and you'll see, once again, all up to date. It's a really good idea to do that as a practice the moment you deploy an instance, just so you're not leaving yourself open to vulnerabilities. You're also not leaving yourself open to coding against packages which have been updated and changed the way that they act. Ubuntu in particular is really good at updating in ways that doesn't impact developers, but still there are cases where your development can be impacted by developing against old code versus new code. So keeping your system up to date is a good way to protect you from those things. Okay, so we'll follow the same process. And this is what I mean by having to provide a password to do a sudo command. It does cache it for a while, but you don't want Docker failing because it can't do its job. And once again, we add some repositories. And add a key. and grab our fingerprint. And add the Docker repositories. Then we have to update those repositories so that their contents are known to your instance. And then we can install Docker. Lastly, we have to edit our files so that Testy the tester can sudo without a password for Docker machine. There we go. And we can exit out of there. If I could type. There we go. So now our instances are both set up, and that should make things work perfectly well. We can then run one command that will create that machine as a control point within Docker locally. And that command looks like this. And what it'll do is it'll provision out and install some Docker config, set up certs, allow the machine to control, your local machine to control. And there we go. So that is the AWS machine configured. And the same for Azure. It's no different. So we run that command, and that adds that cloud server to our local server list. There we go. So now if we could do a Docker machine, Docker dash machine ls, it will list all the machines. So there's our Docker demo AWS, and there's our Docker demo Azure. Both are running. Both are running the current version of Docker, and there's 0 errors. Now, neither of them are active at this point, and that's because you get the hint of what you got to do to activate a machine. And that is right in this message right here. Run Docker machine env AWS. Run Docker machine env demo Docker demo Azure. So we'll start. We'll make the Azure instance the default machine to start. And then you've got to run this one command. Run this command to configure your shell. And so you run that command to configure your shell. And now if we do a Docker dash machine ls, you'll see that there is you'll see that there's an asterisk inactive next to Azure. And so now if I do a Docker PS, it's telling me there's no containers on that server. But all you have to do to run a container on that server now is we got Apache here. We'll just run the default Apache command off of the Docker Hub Apache client. All we're doing here is setting it as active and setting a port, map port 80 to port 80 inside the container. And away we go. Pulling the image from Docker Hub. There you go, and she's done. Do a Docker PS now, and we've got an Apache server that's been up for 15 seconds. And we can come back here and hit enter. And that Apache server's up. It's literally that simple. And now any container you want, you can deploy to that default machine. If you want to change default machines, we come back here and we do that same thing. Docker machine env instead of Azure, we do Docker machine env AWS. Configure our shell, of course. Docker dash machine space ls. And we'll see that AWS is now active. And literally, we can run that same command. If we arrow up to it, we run that same command again, and because we changed hosts, it's now we got a different library. We need to pull it again because it's in a different library. And we do Docker PS now. And we've got an instance up on the AWS side, a container running Apache. And I come over here, over here. And this is the IP address for our AWS side. And voila, we're up. So we now have two containers and two different clouds running, both managed by one Docker machine, my local laptop, configured to manage both environments in real time with ease. And I can write any Docker Compose files or any Kubernetes Docker files and spin them here, no problem at all. So I now open the floor to questions.
Hi, Don. This is Eric. We got a handful of questions just in the QA menu. Are you able to see those? I can also read them out to you if that's a little easier. Just let me know.
Don, you're on mute, I think.
There we go. So I am just looking through the questions to see if there's anything, but if anybody would like to ask a question, feel free.
Well, Don, I do have the first question here, and it's, can the containers be wired to use the vGPUs in the DAIR environment?
Okay, so I've got a question. Data store for authn and authz configurable? Yeah, any configuration you want within Docker. Any kind of tweaks you want, any kind of setups you want. If you want to set up volumes on that local instance, you can do it. If you want to add more space when you're deploying your instance, like a bigger volume for your root disk, you can do that too. If there's something specific, let me know. I see another question. Can containers be wired to use virtual GPUs? In our GPU environment, yes, they can. We've had a couple people in our past environments and in our previous Docker, OpenStack environment use virtual GPUs effectively for within the containers and have GPU applications running within the containers. It does take an NVIDIA version of Docker installed on the machine in order to work, but Docker has processes on that, and so does NVIDIA. So definitely you can follow this exact process with the NVIDIA drivers and get GPU-based containers running. Oh, how do we run patches? Sure. So let's go back to SSH. So there's 3 commands you want for doing patches.
When we can't see your console screen, you have to change.
You want to update your libraries. Oh, if I could type. So you always want to start with updating your libraries.
Don, can you hear me?
And then upgrade does a basic upgrade of all the installed packages in your Ubuntu. There is also yum update processes. I do cover them in a security document, but I can add the process here for. Well, I can add some links to other documents that reflect that process. No problem at all. And then there's one more command you want to run, and this is dist-upgrade. And what dist-upgrade does is upgrade your kernel. And so if there's any kernel updates, they will be done. The one thing to keep in mind is that after you'll see right here, system restart required. I did a kernel update, but I didn't do the reboot because I didn't have time. So once you do a reboot, the kernel updates will apply. But oh, you'll need to share the screen. Oh my goodness. Excuse me. Let me share my screen again. Okay. There we go. We're shared again. Hopefully that is the right screen and everyone's seeing it.
Yes.
Okay. So these are the three commands. Sudo apt get update will do this. Apt get upgrade will do this. If you have a patch, it will ask you to say yes. You just give a capital yes. Just like when we were doing the installs, it'll ask you to confirm. And the same with the dist upgrade. This will upgrade your kernel to the most current kernel version without changing the release you're on. So if you're running Ubuntu 16.04, it's not going to change you from 16.04, but it's going to bring you to the most current kernel for 16.04. So it's these three commands. Right there, there, and there. Terminal manager I am using is Royal TSX. Absolutely love it. It allows you to have extremely high numbers of connections. It allows you to configure each one individually. It allows you to have multiple SSH keys and store them in a secure and encrypted manner. Keeps everything safe and sound. I love it. Couldn't say enough about it. Also allows you to automate tasks and set scripts to run that'll run in your terminal from local. No problem at all. If you're using Windows Home, yes, you can't do Docker Community Edition. But what you could do is you could install Ubuntu as in a secondary partition if you've got the room, or you could install CentOS. There is or BSD Linux. If you have the ability to install any one of those, you could install Docker. But you do in order to install Docker, you do need some of for Windows. You do need some of the professional capabilities. Virtual WAFs IDS pieces supported, hooks log aggregation to a seam. Yes, absolutely. That's about setting up your hosts to be able to be managed by those tools and setting up the right security group rules to allow the communication to happen. By default, your instances are set up with security groups that allow all outbound communication. So if the instance just needs to send data to the seam, for example, then you can do that. But if you do need bidirectional communication, you got to make sure the right ports are open up on your firewalls. This is Sachin asking if you ran a dist upgrade command, do we need to change the distro for the Docker software repos apt file? No, the Docker repo in my process is whatever is the current Docker version. So apt get upgrade will upgrade those Docker components as they become available in that repo. I have not set you to a specific Docker release. You'll always get the most current with this process. When it comes to changing from Xenial to Bionic, that's another command. You can look that up on Ubuntu, no problem at all. I've had no trouble with going from 16 to 18 or 18 to 20. Other than I have seen some issues in 18 when they changed the networking model in Ubuntu. I found some issues with networking for the first couple months. So I wouldn't move to 20 right now. If you start there, you'll probably be fine. But if your environment is set up with 18 and you move to 20 and you had some custom networking, you might run into challenges. Yes, if you set up the DNS or other Docker services to allow, a Docker swarm, say, to run with DNS lookups for containers, all of that works. It's all about configuring your host to allow Docker to communicate in the way you want. All doable though. You have complete control of the host in this model. You can docker-machine SSH. Oh, sorry, I'm already logged in. Let me, if I exit out of the container, out of the host, I can do a docker-machine. Oh, I didn't show you that. SSH and ls. Got to have a list first. You can always use the SSH command that I used at the beginning, but as you're using Docker, it makes more sense. You'll get more used to it. Docker-machine space Docker demo AWS. Oh, you have to tell it to SSH, Don. There you go. And you can just log into the host. At this point, you've got complete control of the host. If you do a sudo docker ps here, you'll see that there's a container running there. You've got complete control to do whatever you need with that container or the environment that container runs in. There are not templates for the security settings, but we've made them as simple as possible, and the details of the security settings you need are in the document that we will be providing. You can pull Docker code from a Git repo right from your command line. You can pull it from Docker Hub, no problem at all. Anything you could do on your local machine with Docker running in your local machine, you can use clarify WSL. It's just not ringing a bell. You should be able to, yes. I'm pretty sure the Windows you should be able to do. The one trick with the Windows subsystem for Linux, if you're dealing with Ubuntu or CentOS, is I don't believe Docker installs Docker machine by default. You have to install it separately from their GitHub. And there's a process for doing that. If you search how to install Docker machine on Linux, they have a process for doing that. It's slightly different to getting Docker running, but they don't assume that your machines out there in the cloud need machine So when you're doing a local version of Ubuntu, you do run into that problem of having to get that done. Yeah, that's just experience. They may have fixed it, but the last version I installed, that was the one challenge. Okay, those two are answered live. Any other questions?
Thank you, Don. I think there's only 2 questions left up there, but we might be able to answer them real quick before tying up here. But I think Cynthia wanted to say a couple things before we hit 2 o'clock today, so I think we'll have time to address some of these questions right after 2 o'clock.
Okay, can you hear me now, folks? I apologize again. I'm having issues. Can anyone hear me?
Yep, Cynthia, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I went on and I did closing thoughts. I wanted to thank everyone for coming. And their closing thought was technology is best when it brings people together. So thank you for all attending today. And again, just want to encourage everyone to continue to bring your suggestions forward for topics and what you'd like to see in webinars. And
okay, I think I've answered the last 2 questions. Bring more if you need to.
And thanks, Don. And the next webinar we will be announcing via email. And the other piece I had mentioned was I was remiss in not introducing Eric Bitmanis, who has been facilitating this session. So that's the Eric you're hearing. He is our Canary marketing and communications resource for the DAIR program. So thank you, Eric. And with that, I think we have answered all the questions that were open, but if you have any as they come up after the session today, by all means, just reach out on Slack. And I think that's it. So again, some additional resources at the end of the presentation, and look for the deck to be forward to you shortly. Thanks, everybody.